first thing I'll say, since this is a virtual meeting, normally we'd have a nice handout for people or be able to give them paper copies of the bylaw and or policy. Can't do that virtually, so we'll just say if you're looking for either of these, they're available at peaceriver.ca/offsite levy. I'll also be able to show the bylaw and or policy and flip to those if needed. Pretty brief agenda, moderate agenda. Mostly going over the modeling, changes to rates, any other significant items or changes that have occurred. So in terms of actual back or highlights, this is the first time the rates have been updated since 2019. The current policy and or bylaw, I forget which, requires that the rates are updated every second year. So that's why we're here based on these updates. The policy, so there's two items. There's a policy which basically directs how we will manage the bylaw, and then there's the bylaw, which is the legislative material law, for lack of a better word, that council will approve. Both of those are changed and updated. They're both before council. Policy changes require a motion of council, and they've reviewed this item. As I said, the changes are pretty minor, and we expect that to be approved by council sometime in July of 2021, so next month. Council's also received the bylaw 2099, and have given it first reading. By them doing that, we were able to proceed on the advertising and the community engagement which with affected parties, which we are doing right now. Thank you for attending. And we'll be able to take any concerns, input, questions, and pass those along to council if there's concerns, if there's suggestions, changes, we will again pass those along to council, or if they're really good ideas, heck, we might even try to incorporate them. So depending on what comes back, that's part of the process. We are doing this engagement with the public to see if there's any significant concerns that you may have. In terms of some of the other financial highlights, compared to the previous model, and as I said, was last updated in 2019, the changes are very minor. I highlighted the word refinements, and that's really what we've done. We've just refined information. We've updated totals. We've done some tweaks to try to improve the accuracy of the model. It is a projection over 25 years, which we allocate to different parts of town, allocate different ratios between existing development and new development, oversizing and other items. So again, we've just made moderate improvements to try to make information more accurate. However, changes from the previous model, which would be going back to 2014, we now show the entirety of a proposed capital plan. So before they just showed a couple of years, now we're showing 25-year projections. We've improved the rationale for how we allocate the percentages based on existing development versus future development. And we've changed the mapping and the actual areas within the off-site levy geographically. So looking at the current model, we have worked to improve the estimate on the anticipated capital work. So as I mentioned, it's a 25-year projection. This is interesting because it shows back when it was originally done in 2014. The projection was that the town would do about $53 million, $52 million worth of work, which at an average of 2.1 million per year is not correct. The previous model was flawed. We identified that during our 2019 update, and we'll continue to say it. And of that $52 million, 13.7 million, or almost 13.8 million, was attributable to future development. So that's 26.3% of that amount was baked in and said to be used for future development and ultimately the offsite levy rates. In 2019, we'd showed an estimate of $161.6 million, which is $6.5 million per year of water, sewer, and transportation work, which is in line with what we've done over kind of like a 5-year period and a reasonable estimate going forward. However, we did say that the amount for future development that would impact the rates was only 6.5 million of that. So the percent that we were attributing towards offsite levies was just over 4%. In 2021, those numbers are a little different again. We've moderated some of our estimates, estimate 146 million over a 25-year horizon. And we're actually saying that the amount for future development is a bit less, just under $5.6 million or 3.82% is attributable to future development and impact offsite levy rates. Here's a really quick example. And this is work that was done in 2014. These are water projects that were shown in the 2014 update. And the fourth column over, the first light green column shows the town share on existing development. So basically we were saying for the first project there, Reservoir 475 feeder main, 35.7 was for existing development. And then the other amounts, the 20% and the 44.3% were allocated towards new development or oversizing, which is gets baked into that formula also. So you'll see there's some very moderate estimates that went towards the town share. Some of them are in the 30s, 40s. Some of them were in 85, 94%, which are probably more reasonable. But a fairly high percentage was attributable or estimated to go towards new development. Under the new modeling, the fourth column over, which is called the town share or percent of existing development, you'll see that the lowest number there is that 86.7% number, meaning that is what we are projecting to or making attributable towards existing development. So future development, whether it's oversizing or an amount for new development, really tops out at the most 15%, but a lot of them are in that 5 or 10% range also. So again, just really rationalizing how much of capital projects that are being built to support water, sewer, transportation infrastructure is really to support existing versus new development or needs. What the ultimate impact is of this, and this is a weighted average that we do calculate looking at all the rates. The previous model, 2019, the weighted average was just under $41,000. In 2021, that number is now about $37,300. So that's about 8% less, give or take, and significant decreases from the 24 to 2016 rates. And again, just a real improvement on the rationalization of what should be charged existing versus new development. We don't have the rates within this presentation. As I said, they are available on our website at that link I showed earlier. I also do have them available. I could flash them up, but they do kind of move around depending on the part of town that's impacted. So the rates do range from a low of 35,000 to a high of 54,758, and that's per hectare, with the vast majority of the rates in between that $35,000 to $44,000 range. There are outliers which have higher or lower rates, and that's an estimate or a projection of the work that is done that benefit those areas. So for example, if there's a lot of work, and again, under the previous model and under the current model, there was significant work done in the south end. So the south end rates were a bit higher in the previous model. Within this model, there's work going on in the downtown area, whole bunch in the area that's adjacent to Lower West Peace, but that impacts Lower West Peace and in those because they do get a benefit from those. So it is really somewhatly location specific. We do know that over the next 5 years, we have a fairly decent plan of where that work is going to occur. Outside of that, it's a little trickier. We do try to reasonably project, but for some of them, we just say, you know, it will benefit the whole town and kind of spread out the cost that way. It doesn't increase the cost by allocating that way, it just spreads it across a larger area. In terms of the modeling itself, the technical term for this is it's a full cost methodology. Well, you could read this, so I'm not going to go on too much, but basically we input all the costs, model them out, and then use them to determine a rate and allocate the cost to developers on an equitable basis based on degree of benefit. What that really means, and this is a quick summary showing of how we do get to that modeling and complete this. And something I didn't say before, but we'll just reiterate. This model is based on, this from an organization or a company called Corvus. They do off-site levy modeling and other modeling, rate modeling throughout the province for many municipalities. And what it is we take the total projected costs for our anticipated capital work over this 25-year period. We add in our projected debt costs or financing costs for these projects. And then we remove other projected grant or other funding we would receive from, say, federal or provincial sources. That gives us a total project balance, in this case of $132.2 million is our estimate. We then take that money and we allocate, as I mentioned before, an amount between existing development versus new development. We assign projects to areas throughout the town based on the benefit to those areas. We allocate over 25 years. So if we say we're doing, you know, not all projects happen right away, we say a whole bunch are going to happen in 2021, some in 2022, some in 2040, and just kind of make reasonable estimations or projections based on that. We do include inflation. I don't want to scare people. The inflation is not 5% like it currently is, or it's probably a bit lower, but when we did this back in March, the inflation rate was lower, so it was a lower rate. And finally, we apply off-site levy contributions that we have received or will receive in the future to reduce this amount. And then from there, it's all calculated, and then we do determine the rates for each area of town. If there's any specific questions on this, and I know it's a lot of information to take in, plus it's a little tricky to do virtually because, like I said, we can't, normally we'd have a nice handout that explains a lot of this. But if you do have any questions, and you might not now, but in the future, please get in touch. Myself or Alicia or Jim, you know, we'll be able to answer anything if you have any concerns, if you think something looks askew. Within the bylaw, there's a report that accompanies the bylaw. It's about 23, 24 pages, and it discusses this rationale methodology, and it identifies the work that's put into it and all the projects that are included within the model, how they're allocated out, which years are allocated, which areas they benefit, other financial information showing, you know, projected grants and that kind of stuff, and shows all the backup and background to determine rates. They are in there. It's a little convoluted to read because, again, we're compressing a very complicated financial model into a report. But as I said, if there are any questions on this, that, or the other, please don't hesitate to ask and or get in touch in the future. That's it for the financial component and overview of this. Anything after this is more policy or bylaw discussion. Alicia will discuss those, but as a natural stopping point, I'm going to wait about 10 seconds. If there's any questions, you could ask them now, or as I said, you can get in touch later.
I have a question.
Yes, absolutely.
Jeannie Kalen here. Yeah, like you said, this is very complicated. I guess my question is so this is the financial end of things. Is there some type of incentives that the town is planning to provide for developers? You know, like some communities, I'm told, can, forgive taxes for a couple of years, or does that apply to any of this, or?
Those are not contemplated within the bylaw itself. That would be a different program. We do have other programs for that. There's our downtown revitalization grant, which currently exists and does provide some tax relief on improvements in the downtown zone, I believe it is, Alicia. And that's been in place for 4 or 5 years. Well, since I've been here, so maybe 6 years. Hasn't had much uptake for various reasons. And I'll just say to this group, this is something that we are reviewing this year and we'll bring back to council. I don't know if it'd be this existing council or the new council. Our elections in October. But we do want to put in front of a council group more options, because right now it's not moving the needle in terms of getting significant development. There's been one successful application so far, and yeah, so the program isn't nudging people to achieve what we want. So that is a separate program. It's not contemplated within the off-site levies, and it is something that is being reviewed and will be before council for them to consider.
Okay, thanks. I think it's really important for us to encourage development to come to Peace River.
Absolutely, and I think we're kind of at the point, the town didn't consider this in the past, but I think moving forward, it's one of those things where we might be, in my position would be to give significant tax deferrals to incentivize people to make some changes or improvement, knowing that, if we defer those for like a 5-year period or longer, we will eventually collect those taxes. We just might take a while to get there, but we got to think long term, 20, 30, 40, 50 years, and we'll get the benefit at some point. We just may have to defer the town's benefit to the advantage of development or improvement within the town.
Great, thank you.
Any other questions?
I agree with you totally, Greg, with your comments.
Yep. No. Yeah. I mean, it is pretty clear. It's a nice program, but it's not moving the needle in any way. So it is something we're going to be looking at. Okay. Will there be a chance to ask at the end also, or like I said, you could interrupt at any time. I will pass it over to Alicia, and she could talk about changes to the policy and bylaw.
Great, thanks, Greg. And I'll just, Larry, I know when you came in here, so I just want to highlight that we just got through the financial section of the presentation. It will be available online, and we'll also have a video recording of it. So if you want to go back and take a look at what Greg's presented, that option will be available to you. But in terms of the off-site levy bylaw and policy, so we have the bylaw which establishes our off-site levy. It establishes the rates and the areas. And then we have a policy associated with that bylaw that helps us to administer the bylaw. So what the policy does is it provides us with applicability thresholds. So there are circumstances when a development permit or a subdivision come forward where taking the off-site levy at that moment does not make sense. So we have highlighted a lot of those within our policy, and that's what we call the applicability thresholds. And then we also have a section on deferrals. So that is when an offsite levy is applicable, and we are going to take it at either subdivision or development, because those are the two moments in the development process when we can impose an offsite levy. But we know that there are moments where imposing it at the beginning of a development, that can be quite onerous on a developer just from a cash flow perspective. So we give ourselves options to defer the collection of the money, which helps with the cash flow for the developer. And then finally, we also have policies around the construction of front-end infrastructure. So there are circumstances where a developer might be in the position where they want or need infrastructure to serve their development that the town otherwise would not be developing at that time. But we can enter into agreements that allow them to do that, and then that can also be used to defer or to balance off the costs of the offsite levy that they have to pay. And so this policy also provides us with direction for how to deal with those situations. So that is what is in our offsite levy policy. Currently, we are looking at an update to our policy, but it is very, very minor in terms of what is in the policy itself for content. If you are very motivated, can go see what the changes to our policy are. They are on the last council priority and governance meeting agenda, and we provided them with the track changes version. So you can really see exactly what we're changing in the policy compared to what's in place today. And it is all administrative clarity for language and things along those lines. So there's nothing really substantive that's changing what's in the policy today. So there's no major things to really speak to. It's working for us right now. What's not working, and the big substantive change that we're making, is actually in the offsite levy policy, or bylaw rather. So that's on the next slide.
On the Jays, and they lost some tough games.
So the offsite levy bylaw, the major change that we are bringing forward to council, in addition to just updating the rates, which is the reason that we're going through this process right now, is to update the rates. But the other major change is how we are dealing with subdivisions, and specifically arterial roads and roads in general. So we are replacing what was called arterial roads. We're just replacing it with the word roads instead. So the effect of that is that when a developer is developing a larger area of land, so they're developing not just a parcel, but they're creating parcels of land. We also typically in that situation will require that they create a road that provides access to that land. Under our current bylaw, the road land is something that has an offset levy applied to it. So if you are developing 1 hectare of road, you have to pay 1 hectare worth of offset levies on the road. There are reasons for that. It's a system that, or the status of other municipalities do that, and they take offset levy on land that is for roads. And that makes sense in some of those areas because roads do generate traffic, which does impact our infrastructure, which does create demand and create capital requirements. So there's a rationale for doing it that way, but that rationale doesn't really work here in the town of Peace River. We don't have arterial roads really. From a traffic perspective, our arterials are principally our highways. They're under Alberta Transportation's jurisdiction, and we really manage and deal with the collector and local roads. So we are changing the bylaw so that when someone is developing and they're doing a subdivision, they do have to provide us with the land for the road so that they can provide access to the parcels that are being created. And just like everywhere else in the province, when a developer develops a road, they also have to develop the road physically, do the engineering and build out the road to our municipal standards before we'll take it over. Those things don't change, but what does change is that we're no longer going to take the offsite levy on the land that is the road portion, and that will reduce the financial burden to the developer. So that's the major change that we are doing to our bylaw that is very developer friendly. So I don't expect any developers to have any concerns with that. And I do think it makes sense for the town and how land is being developed here in Peace River and the incremental way that it's being developed when it does get developed. So that's our major change. We do have a second change that is more of an administrative, cutting administrative red tape, administrative processes. Right now, our bylaw directs us to update the offsite levy rates during non-review years. So a non-review year is the year we don't go through the model and update all of our assumptions and derive new rates. So this year is a review year. we're updating the model and we're updating the bylaw. In non-review years right now, we were supposed to adjust our rates based on inflation. But that's every single year. It means we have to go through this process every single year because a change to the rates is a change to the bylaw. And that means we have to go through the bylaw process or we're not doing it properly. So it just creates a lot of process requirements and it doesn't really move the needle very much for the town of Peace River. The amount of development that's happening here doesn't mean we need to update the model. The assumptions that are going into the model, they're not changing fast enough to really mean that we have to keep up in that way. So we are just eliminating that requirement to adjust the rates on the non-review years. So we're still reviewing the bylaw every 2 years, which is for the pace of development in the town of Peace River, I think is very reasonable. And that's the other major change to the bylaw that we have going forward. So I think that is everything in our presentation. We can take more questions.
No, my comments are thank you and for your time and effort and looking after the concerns of the developer.
We are listening.
Thank you. Those are all the comments I have. I'm sorry I was late. I couldn't figure out how to get on Zoom. I'm not that computer literate.
We will be loading a version of the presentation if you want to watch the entire thing. It should be going up hopefully tomorrow, as long as our communications person can get to it tomorrow, but it'll be on our website.
Where do they find that, or how do we get in touch or tell people where it is?
Yeah, so that will be back on the Off-Site Levy page. So Greg mentioned this at the beginning, but it's good to reiterate now. peaceserver.ca/Off-Site Levy is the page where all of the information is about this update, and that's where we will plunk down that video to watch as well.
peaceserver.ca/Off-Site Levy.
That's right.
Thank
Or if you
Oh,
go
I
to
see
the
it.
town page, you can also just search Off-Site Levy in the search bar on the webpage, and you should find it that way as well.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Does anybody else have any questions? Oh, I'm seeing a question. Oh, I'm seeing it. Thank you, Melanie, for your kind feedback. All right. If that is everything.
Thank you, guys.
Yes, thank you very much.
Thanks for
Have a good
coming.
evening, everyone.